All things living transform. We build, break, become, and become ourselves again.
Oyster, oyster, oyster.
New York City used to be like the oystering capital of the world.
Depending on the balance of male, female in the water, they can switch back and forth. How wonderful would that be?
The tides rise and fall. An island is named, renamed, and made a city.
When you don't remember history, it tends to repeat itself.
It's a lot easier to do harm than do good.
Every little bit counts.
People like how salty this is.
Emily Packer. So nice to meet you. Although you look so familiar to me.
Maybe we've run into each other in the New York scene.
Very likely. Are you in Brooklyn?
I live in Queens.
Where are you?
In Ridgewood.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in Ridgewood about 8 years.
Wow.
And I love it there. It's like an interesting space of transition, both being sort of on the border of Brooklyn and also sort of on the front of gentrification right now.
Right. Yeah. No, I know folks that have been living there for a while too, and then you've been there 8 years.
Yeah, it feels like an accomplishment, and it feels kind of wild to me that the last 4 of them I've been working on this project. And it's really allowed me to sort of see New York, to sort of like intentionally investigate in a way that I really wanted.
Mm-hmm. Where are you from?
I'm from Northern California, the Bay Area, and
Okay.
yeah, I did a stint in Western Massachusetts for college, and then pretty much relatively soon after I graduated, realized that if I wanted to be making documentary films, not within academia, that I needed to probably move to New York. And so I thought I'd try it, and I'm still there so far.
Mm-hmm. And what was that like for you, moving to New York? And did you have anything resembling a network at the time, or did you?
I really didn't.
How did you establish that?
Well, that was definitely part of the appeal. I was much younger, and the idea of moving to New York by myself, like without having any family nearby, not really knowing anyone in the city, it was challenging, especially to be able to like garner the collaborative resources that I need.
Mm-hmm.
No. But she's right here now. She's
Oh my gosh. Well,
but she's got to chill.
What's her name? What's her name?
This is Lucky Star.
Lucky Star.
Yeah, and she has a huge brother who's being very good in the corner. But
Oh, okay. Well, so does there's one over here too, being very well behaved. But he's not he'll bark, but he's not only if like he senses somebody's coming or something like that, but he doesn't
Guard
bark.
dog. Yeah. Anyway, New York was like, it was a weird dream for me, and I don't think I realized that until I actualized moving there. And pretty quickly I got a job watching all of the raw footage for the Anthony Bourdain show and that whole production team's network. And I was, being like the lowest on the totem pole in post-production, but handling like huge amounts of resources and raw material and backing them up and learning new systems. And I knew I wanted to work my way up to editing, but I just like wasn't really finding the path that I felt comfortable with within that sort of like industrial television space, and started like growing my directorial practice instead. And I was a part of the collaborative studio with Union Docs, which was a couple years after I had moved, and right around when I was getting really sick of all of the slow-mo B-roll of people eating food at Anthony Bourdain's show. And so I was really hungry for more collaborators in the city. I had met some people, but I hadn't really like established my own practice. And so the collaborative studio was really wonderful for that. And it was a pretty small group of people at this Brooklyn nonprofit, but we were all, trying things out together for about 10 months. And now, I'm still in like almost daily contact with a lot of them, and several of them have agreed to work on this Holding Back the Tide with me, my feature. And yeah, it's been really, that was a great launching point for me to like really find my community in what I needed to feel sort of resourced to direct. It was just people.
So one of the people you met somewhere along the way, tell me how you met Lynn Sachs, how that, yeah.
Lynn, I actually met through Sean Hanley, who has been like a longtime DP of hers. And he and I had met because I saw a trailer for his really beautiful thesis film about shoehorse crabs. And we just connected over making weird aquatic films in a very DIY, with a very DIY attitude. And at some point he thought that I should probably meet Lynn, and he connected us.
Amazing. And now you're editing her latest.
Yeah, I'm editing a film of hers. I think it is just around the longest film that she's ever made, which I feel weirdly proud about. We just like hit that 83 or so minute mark, and we've been collaborating really closely for about a year now, and I can see like the final pieces coming into place in the edit, and it's fun to be like a part of her process and to find so much like kinship and aesthetic relations between the two of us, even though she has like 40 years of experience and has been really like deeply maturing her own practice for so long, to like be able to sit in a room and really quickly get a sense of each other and where the sort of lines of taste delineate or come together. It's pretty cool.
Did you always know that you were going to make experimental films? Was that something that you were always interested in?
Definitely not. I think I got into filmmaking via environmental activism, actually. When I was a teenager, this was sort of I was heavily involved in some ultimately like kind of silly nonprofit work, or like or greenwashing nonprofit work. But I was really I was very highly motivated to be involved in my community in the like environmental space, which is funny then that it took me so long to make more environmental films, but now I feel like I've sort of full circled back there. And I had a course in my public high school that was teaching me how to how to make films, like the very basics. And I just loved the process of it. Really, really fell into, especially the, I don't know. I mean, I just felt like documentary was the way that I wanted to be in the world. And I remember going to college in one of my very first classes at Hampshire College. I saw some experimental work, and there were two professors that were like raving about this experimental like durational piece that they were showing on 16 millimeter. And I walked out of the class thinking, like, this isn't what I want. I don't want to make experimental work. I want to make something that everyone can watch, like sort of thinking that there's like a barrier to understanding that type of work. And it definitely surprised me that I came out of that program really leaning much more DIY and experimental than I ever would have thought, but still sort of retaining like a more basic desire to be approachable by audiences who aren't necessarily familiar with that work. So maybe my tastes as an audience member have grown a lot since then, and I really do appreciate a lot of even more experimental work and more durational art. But in my own, I think trying to find the right balance between like a praxis of theory, applied theory, and like audience entry points is something that I'm it's the tension that like exists within the work. And my sort of secret goal now, or not that secret, but my sort of subliminary goal is to sort of trick people into thinking that they can understand experimental work, even if it's not something they would think about themselves.
What is durational filmmaking? What is that?
Durational meaning like a part of the purpose of the piece is to get you to feel how long it is. Like
I see.
like you're experiencing the time-based medium as it's unfolding.
I see. Yeah. Well, it seems like that's what was once a subgenre of like nonfiction filmmaking is become much more commonplace to me. Yeah, there's lots of documentaries that are kind of more the linear traditional, but it also seems like what we call experimental is kind of become much more common and familiar.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of shifting trends right now. A few years ago, probably right pre-pandemic, there was a lot of hype about how much money there has been in documentary overall, like how through history, how much effort and sort of like funding is being poured into documentary. And the truth of that is that it's like pretty like conglomerated within large scale institutions being handed to certain types of projects that align with what the higher ups think is palatable for audiences. So there's like lucky. Sorry. Is it loud right now? No. Okay.
Not at all.
Okay, great. In any case, like there's a lot of power, there's a lot of financial power being poured into telling certain stories, I think. And it's especially evident in like how we see certain types of narratives being repeated. So like while in some ways, what was that? The Tiger King or whatever was so exciting. It was like an exciting moment that everyone was watching, supposedly a non-scripted series together. It also had so many like narrative, I don't know, more sort of like
tropes or whatever.
Yeah, just like a lot of construction around it to match up more with narrative television.
Sure.
And I don't know. I think
well, that's definitely very common.
Yeah, and and just, like stories about one person that is supposed to be emblematic somehow of like a larger emotional story. And maybe there's some, influence from Hollywood films or from narrative films to create that hero's journey arc for a real person that we can meet. But for me, I'm much less interested in that. I want to meet a lot of people in my films.
Mm-hmm. Did you meet a lot in this film? Holding
Oh
back the
yeah.
tide.
Holding Back the Tide, I felt like I met the whole city in a way.
Right. Oh,
Hi.
look at that. Another appearance.
You have to be quiet.
I oh,
Good boy.
he's being very reasonably well behaved.
Yeah, he
Just
wants
wants to get in
something.
on the he just wants to get in the I think he's definitely wants either a walk or he's wanting your attention.
Yeah, I have a cat. They're much less communicative.
I know, we have one
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I met a lot of people in this process. From all the characters that we actually cast in the film, like, former WNBA star Sue Wicks, who's that's not cool, dude.
That's the first
Sorry.
time I've heard anything.
Okay, come here. Come here. Come here. Odie. Sorry, I'm afraid I'm gonna speak to you and then he'll feel ignored. Yes, okay,
Right. Oh
good
no,
job.
it's a good idea. Just let's bring him in on the show. I
Yeah,
think it's a good idea. He's a sweet.
that's
Look how cute. I know I would do the same, but I can't angle this whole operation otherwise. Where were we? Where were we, Emily?
we were talking about people I met through
Yeah.
this project. We had a long period of research for Holding Back the Tide, partially because, COVID shut down the city while we had just started filming. And so we had a lot of time to think and to research and to meet people over Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
We met like the head chief of the MTA's waste department from his basement in Long Island over Zoom. And we met a bunch of oyster farmers in Long Island. I had started working at this like market stand in Union Square where I was selling fish and like meeting everybody that would come and buy oysters every Saturday. And the sort of creative team was quite big because we wanted I wanted it to be like a very collectively made project, even though I was directing it. And so a lot of the team members that might usually in a typical film come on later were involved earlier. And so our editor, was getting footage early, but she also would come on shoots sometimes if we needed someone to fill in. And, it felt like a whole community that we were building behind the scenes and in front of the camera as well, and doing our best to connect oyster folks when we realized that there wasn't a connection somewhere that we thought that there should be, either for like via the film or for the film or just in general. Because it's a pretty robust community, the oyster lovers. Everybody's loving the oyster from their own different perspective.
But so what was your objective to kind of was always the environmental side of it, and how oysters are, um, I guess you could say an important part of um, the ecosystem of the rivers
Yeah, I
and
mean,
keeping them clean.
yes, yeah, oysters are water filter. They're filter feeders, so they filter the water that they live in.
Uh,
And I think a single one can filter 40 to 50 gallons a day.
a day.
So yeah,
And there's
and
probably dozens of them.
at least dozens. Well, in New York,
Yeah.
before colonization, we had over half of the world's oyster population was in the New York harbor.
Just because of the
Something,
temperature and all that stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's just like a perfect breeding ground for them. And also, how in some places there are coral reefs that line the
Right.
ocean floors. For us, we had oyster reefs. It was just
Oh,
this
right.
whole landscape beneath the water made out of oysters, And then, you know, they provide biodiversity because they're that like rocky habitat builder, and they also, via that sort of shape and how they're functioning on the seafloor, they protect it against storm surges. So now that we have less of them, our shores are much more subject to flooding and large storm issues when larger waves come in.
It's amazing.
But you asked if that was my aim, and I definitely think I was interested in the fact that the oysters had a history in New York that was one that was linear, where we used them up and we used their shells for building material in Lower Manhattan, and we had sort of eaten as many as we could get our hands on until they were poisoned and gone.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are these organizations working to sort of interrupt that linear cycle and turn it into something that's actually cyclical, that actually comes back around. And so that this sort of like multifold environmental concern was interesting to me, definitely, as was the history. But I think that the thing that drew me towards them was this idea of current human beings, current New Yorkers, imagining the future for their cities, and what is that imagination sort of driven by, and the sort of necessary optimism that I felt like people who volunteer all of their time towards these like teeny tiny creatures, one little step at a time, working towards something greater for like the good of the city in the long term. That was kind of like unfathomable to me, especially, you know, living in a city where longevity isn't always the top priority for what gets approved and what gets funding and what is actually going on like a citywide level.
But is there like a an actual governmental strategy, or is there like some sort of policy approach to oysters in the city?
Not so far. I think that there have been the main project that's doing oyster restoration on a large scale is the Billion Oyster Project, and they work in conjunction with public schools all over New York.
Oh, wow. Right.
And they're a nonprofit. I think that they do get a lot of I know that they do get a lot of support from the state and also from the city in order to run, in addition to like various other channels and ways that they operate. There have been like certain legislation opportunities that have come and gone about, you know, giving a tax break to restaurants that participate in shell recycling programs that then become a part of the restoration. And there's also legislation, or at least an effort towards legislation, to stop CSOs, which are combined sewage overflow systems. Basically, every time it rains in New York, the city it wasn't really built with this many people in mind. And every single time it rains in New York City, the sewage system gets overwhelmed and flows directly into the bay and into the harbor. So as long as that is
sounds
happening,
problematic.
it sounds problematic and a little gross.
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so considering like how your film could be like something to inspire, influence, impact, right? Was there any point where you thought, oh, I should make maybe I should make something closer to an advocacy film, or it was always like, you know, this is what I'm doing, this is the right path, and I have no doubt like this is gonna, you know, have people are gonna respond to this film.
There was plenty of doubt involved, I would say, but also a fair degree of stubbornness. I think early on in the process, after I had pitched the idea to my team, we watched a short film that essentially was an advocacy film that was made by a talented director who, you know, interviewed the head of Billion Oyster Project and like showed how the site, and it was very straightforward. It was very simple. And, you know, there's a lot to be said just about the facts of it. Like we've been talking about, it is so interesting, and it's enough to make, you know, a nice short advocacy piece. And we saw it and we were like, thank goodness someone's already done that. We don't have to do it. It means that we get to do something different and really sort of inform our approach through our research and our perspective on that research.
Yeah, and I suppose you could still have maybe you're already doing it where you have like some educational distribution of the film.
Yeah, I would really, I mean, I'm working with Grasshopper Films, which is
Right.
amazing on the educational, and I think that the film we made is quite intersectional in its approach. So, you know, there are environmental and more hard science-based ways that it can be used, but I also think that it's being touted as like a feminist film, an intersectionally feminist film with a lot of queer theory. This is my goal, is that there's sort of like an entryway into all of those types of approaches that we took. And I would really love to develop some more educational materials alongside the nonprofits that we were working with that know more about the oysters than we could fit into one movie about them.
Well, I think it was really like just a very satisfying experience seeing it. Um, and I learned a lot. And then my girlfriend, like I told her, like this is the film, and you know, it's about oysters, and she goes, "Do you know in New York that there's a you know they have a history of like really having an enormous population?" I was like, "Yes, this is what the film's about." Anyway,
Yeah, no, it's great. I think it's
yeah,
great that we are getting that there's more awareness and that there seems to be a lot of interest in the new story of oysters in New York, because we had one and it was such a huge part of the history, but that story is changing a little bit with
yeah.
how much buzz there is in New York. And if the film can be a part of that, I think it will definitely stand out as, you know, this very sort of queer take on what we can learn from the oyster itself.
Well, the name of the documentary is called "Holding Back the Tide," and it's directed by Emily Packer. It had its festival premiere at DOC NYC.
Yep.
Okay. And what a nice New York. It makes sense, you know, it's a New York story. It had a theatrical in New York already at the Firehouse Cinema at DCTV, and it's going to have a theatrical in Los Angeles starting Friday, October 4th at the Laemmle, at the, well, I guess one of the at various Laemmle theaters is what I'm going to take away from that. Maybe there's a few. It's going to play at.
Yeah, well, you we have a couple of advanced screenings, October 2nd at the Monica, October 3rd at NoHo, and then the week run is
Oh,
at the Laemmle
Monica.
Royal, I
Oh,
believe.
Royal. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll let
It's a
everybody
whole
know.
other language on the LA
Oh, I
side of
know those
things.
theaters very well. In fact,
Mm.
there was a documentary about the Laemmle family, and I had on the Laemmle guys.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. So people can visit holdingbackthetidefilm.com to get more information. And also, I guess you're on, maybe it's on social media. I don't know. But people can find out more about the film and reach out and all that.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, we're definitely on the gram, as they say, at Holding Back the Tide. And
And
uh,
at the same time, you're also finishing up Lynn Sax's new non work of nonfiction. So I can't wait to see that.
yeah, thank you. We Lynn did a Q&A with me actually at the DCTV
Yeah.
Firehouse Cinema screening, and it was really special. She had seen the film, she had seen Holding Back the Tide when it came out in
Hmm.
October, but we didn't at DOC NYC, but we hadn't spent as much time just sitting and talking about film
Right.
together.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just really felt so nice for her to chat to me about collaboration on the project, since she and I are now collaborating on her new one.
Well, maybe we can do this again and you can join me and Lynn, because she's like been on here, I think, just as much as anybody ever had on the podcast. I've been doing it for like 13 years, and she's like one of the most frequent guests, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, well, she's always got something cooking.
I know.
She
That's
can't
very
wait
true.
to be picture locked with this film so she can get
Well,
on to the next one.
yeah, I love that. All right. Well, Emily, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for watching the movie and talking to me about it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you to the guys there in the living room with you. Yeah, a
Shout out.
sweet dog. I know. Maybe I'll show you this guy in a moment. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.